Welcome back. Kenyans are gearing up for general elections on the 9th of August. Uhuru Kenyatta will step down after 10 years at the helm. Vying for his position are former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and Deputy President William Rutto. Voters will also be choosing parliamentarians, governors and other local leaders. But the run-up to the elections has not been smooth. There's been criticism of excessive force against protesters, attacks on journalists and freedom of speech. Let's discuss this now. Very important, I must say, elections in the West African powerhouse with Civicus East Africa researcher Sylvia Mbataru. Sylvia, good morning and thank you very much for your time. You, in fact, as an organization, released a report on this. Just talk us through the report, which, among others, reveals the use of excessive force to clamp down on protesters and suppressing the dissenting voices leading up to these elections.
Thank you so much for having me. So we released a report in collaboration with the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Basically, the report looks at the last 1 year in terms of civic freedoms in the country. And the report looks at a number of things in terms of the space to exercise civic freedoms for Kenyans. And one of the main things, as you mentioned rightly, is the excessive use of force to clamp down on protesters. So we have, policemen using live ammunition at times and crowd control weapons such as the use of tear gas, water cannons, and batons, basically to clamp down on protests. With regards to journalists, we have documented a number of cases where journalists are being attacked because of their work reporting, for example, on corruption or reporting on things to do with matters regarding land and things like that. And in terms also of media freedom, where we saw a number of newsrooms being shut down earlier this year for failure to apparently comply with some requirements for licensing. So the report documents what we have been documenting over the last 1 year. And rightly so, one of the big things that is really sticking out is the use of excessive force by the police and also misapplying the law to prevent protests from actually happening.
So this goes beyond the elections from what I'm getting here. It's not a situation where in the lead up to elections we're seeing perhaps rally groups for a particular candidate being suppressed or not allowed to voice their support for that candidate. It's nothing of that nature. It's in fact the ordinary protest that would be taking place by community members, be it the cost of living or anything else. That's what is actually leading to the excessive force.
Yes. So the protest, so what we have seen actually in the last 10 years under the ruling party that is right now coming to an end has been the escalating, restrictions of civic space. And this past year has not been different. So usually what we see is that most protests, regardless of the theme under which they're being led, are usually very much brutally suppressed. However, also we've seen also in the last few months some rallies also from other parties being suppressed, to be honest. We've seen also authorities denying them licenses or permits to hold rallies in certain government institutions, for example, stadiums. So we have seen also quite a bit of disruption for the organizing of rallies for some particular parties.
We've been seeing on social media banners or promotion of the eNCA revolution, which is related, we understand, to the cost of living. How excessive has the force been to try and suppress that revolution or that protest?
So this particular protest has faced a number of disruptions. So for one, we have seen situations where the police deny permission, quote-unquote permission, for the protesters to actually to go ahead with protests. So usually under the Kenyan law, protesters are required to notify the authorities within 3 days of a protest. But what we have been saying is that the police are actually interpreting this to mean that they have a right to either deny or give permission. But this is a very misinterpretation of the law, because the law does not require the police to give permission. They only require you to notify. And the reason for this notification is to allow the police to be able to facilitate a protest. So that they can provide security and they can also organize traffic flow and things like that. But we see a situation where for the eNCA revolution, in one case a few months ago, we saw the notification actually the police in charge who received the notification actually denying and wrote on the letter deny permission without any providing any explanation. We've seen situations also where these letters are being torn apart by the police just to deny permission for them to take them up. We've also seen a lot of arrests for protesters under the JAR revolution. A lot of them are being arrested as well, and also being disrupted using batons to scare the protesters from coming together to actually go on protests. So they've experienced some disruptions in the protests.
Are you not being far too kind insofar as your assessment of their response? Is it really them misinterpreting that they're not there to give permission for a protest, but to rather assist to ensure that there's calm throughout the protest? Do you believe that there's honestly a misinterpretation of their role when perhaps a notice is issued that ordinary citizens will be protesting?
It is a very deliberate misinterpretation, and it's not well intended at all. Because what we have is, so this particular law that provides for the requirement to notify is a requirement that falls under the Public Order Act. The Public Order Act is a very old law that came into force during the colonial period, where police officers had a lot of power to control and things like that. But in 2010, we got a new constitution that guarantees the right to protest. And with this new constitution that guarantees the right to protest, then things like notification should not be used by authorities to deny the right to protest. But what we are seeing is that despite this new framework that allows the right to protest, the police willfully and intentionally misinterpret this law, very unlawfully so, to be honest. It's not allowable even under international law standards, but they continue to use this law in a very malicious way to deny the right to protest. So it's very deliberate on their part, and it is also not well intended at all.
Do you believe, from just your assessment and your report, that these elections will be free and fair?
I would for that, I think I would say we're going to see. I wouldn't want to make a comment on that very directly, but I think what we shall do is, we are waiting to see. The IEBC, which is our commission for the elections, has been promoting and insisting that they are going to be, but we shall wait and see. I think at this point that is what I can say. We shall wait and see.
All right. Sylvia Mbataru, thank you very much for your time. That's Civicus East Africa researcher speaking to us.